Our speaker this morning is Jonathan John. Jonathan is a four-year student from Pottstown, PA. He's a member of the varsity boys squash team and the jazz ensemble, and he is a math and French language fellow. He's also the proud roommate of Emil Palacios Alvarez. Jonathan.
Morning. I would like to start by telling you guys a story. I was sitting in my 7th grade math class, doing schoolwork, when the kid sitting next to me told a joke. He said, "Why don't black people get sunburned?" His answer, "Because there's no sunlight in prison." I didn't find the joke particularly funny, and I didn't hear anyone laugh. When I turned around to gauge everyone's reactions, I had a sort of epiphany. Of all the people in the room, I was the only melanated kid in the room. It had been this way for a long time, but I never realized it until that very moment. Melanin is a substance in the human body that produces pigment in the eyes, hair, and skin, and protects cells from harmful UV rays. So actually, melanin is the reason why I don't get sunburn, not prison. The term melanated refers to people who have high amounts of melanin in their bodies. In my neighborhood growing up, nearly none of my friends looked like me. At school, there have only been a handful of melanated kids in my class ever since kindergarten. This realization was very strange and yet somewhat terrifying to me. I feel like I didn't notice this for so long because I'd become accustomed to this environment. This reality applied in other non-academic spaces, not only in my neighborhood growing up, but on the squash court, at summer camps, and in various clubs. As a result of this fact, I've had various interesting experiences from which I've learned many lessons. Throughout school, particularly elementary school, a lot of older kids would ask to touch my hair, which was very different from theirs. This didn't bother me, so I would allow them to. After running their fingers over my hair for a few seconds, they would often give comments along the lines of, "It's so soft," or "It feels like wool." I would often reply with a thanks, feeling some odd sense of pride. Another interesting phenomenon that frequently happened to me is that I would get confused for another melanated kid in the school who vaguely resembled me, both here at Hill and elsewhere. Shout out Fife. Additionally, there would be times where I'd be with a group of kids my age. We'd tell each other what name we looked like we had. Some kids would get names like Tyler, Steven, but everyone always told me I looked like Tyrone or Jamal. While any of these events could possibly be labeled as prejudice, given that I hadn't personally been offended at the time, my perception has been altered so that I simply chalk them up to ignorance. And at the end of the day, isn't that what all forms of discrimination really are? Racism, homophobia, sexism, xenophobia, etc., are all just different forms of ignorance. We should not be quick to take offense, for it is written that the taking of offense lodges in the bosom of fools. That's the first lesson. The taking of offense and being quick to label actions, especially people, is truly a foolish thing to do. I remember sitting on the bus on my way to school with my little sister, and I heard a conversation behind me in which two kids were talking about the movie 42, which is about Jackie Robinson, if you don't know, and one of them used the N-word to describe him. The moment I heard that word, my mind filled with anger. I balled my fists as tightly as I could, and I felt a strong desire to inflict pain upon that kid, but I restrained myself. However, the next time that I heard this word, I reacted differently. I refrained from taking offense and thus didn't feel a need to restrain myself. Years later, I was sitting on another bus, this time heading to soccer practice for school. One of my classmates thought it was funny to repeatedly say the N-word, 10 times fast, like some sort of twisted tongue twister. I was sitting nearby, so once he had finished his recitation, he turned to look at me, and I could sense some other eyes on me. I could have gotten angry, but at that moment, for some reason, I didn't feel anger, but pity, disappointment at his ignorance. So I just shook my head at him. Another event happened more recently, at the beginning of this year at Hill. I was in the weight room hitting bicep curls, and a student said the Chinese word equivalent to the N-word. I believe it translates to black monster or black ghost. Noticing it through the sound of my headphones, I quickly turned my head to look at him, and that startled him a lot. I was more disappointed than upset, but this kid seemed terrified. As I removed my headphones, he frantically apologized, claiming that he didn't know what the word meant. He later reached out to me to apologize, and I forgave him, telling him not to do it again. However, we both knew fully well that he knew what he had said. If you didn't know what the word meant, why did you react the way you did when I noticed you? The N-word originated from the Latin word for black, Niger. It was originally used similarly to how African American is used in our time today, but devolved into a derogatory slur over time. Nowadays, it's commonly used with an A replacing the ER at the end, but the horrible meaning of the word remains. Words have power, and this word is a dangerous weapon that some, unfortunately, choose to wield without shame. I know some of you have or still use this word, and although I can by no means control what you say, I can only ask that you consider why you do so. Does it make you feel cool or special? How? Why do you think it does? Just something to think about. Lesson 2, words have power, so be careful which ones you choose to use. The concept of race is subjective and really somewhat illogical. For example, I could have used the term black instead of melanated to refer to myself during this talk. But the only black things about me are the hair on my head and this little mole on my face. I don't know if you can see it from here. My skin is in fact brown, but I'm not brown either because brown refers to a different racial group. So if I'm neither black or brown, I guess you could call me African American. The American part makes sense to me because I was born here. I'm from Pottstown. However, if you consider the belief that life started on the African continent, wouldn't every human on Earth be of African descent? And even then, there are some white people whose skin isn't actually white, who live in Africa and thus are more African than I am. My family isn't even from Africa, I'm from Haiti. So categorizing people by race makes little sense. Many times we've put too much focus on categorizing people, whether through race or even something as seemingly meaningless as high school cliques. If I remember correctly from 20th century history, categorization or classification is the first of the 10 stages of genocide. So we shouldn't allow ourselves to be separated. Growing up, I loved to build with Legos. Before building a Lego set, I would separate the Legos by colors, and in doing so, it'd be easier for me to use the pieces to achieve my desired build. In a similar way, by allowing ourselves to be categorized like Legos, perhaps according to color, we allow ourselves to be more easily controlled. Thus, the third and final lesson, avoid using categorizing language, as it only serves to divide and weaken us. Instead of celebrating our differences, we need to celebrate what we have in common. This doesn't mean ignoring our backgrounds, as those can shape our identities. But we have to show everyone respect, because at the end of the day, that's what's most important. Rather than becoming angry and offended, giving the offender the reaction that they're seeking, we can try to educate others. This way, we can work to diminish ignorance and reduce hatred as a result. Given that we are imperfect humans, ignorance will always exist, but we can work to limit it. To summarize the 3 lessons. 1, don't take offense to things that people may do or say, because at the end of the day, we have no control over the ignorance of others, only control over our own actions. 2, be careful of the words that you use, as not only can they offend others, but they can show your own level of ignorance. And 3, see people for who they are, not the boxes they're often sorted into. I urge you to figure out how these apply to you, because it's different for everyone. We all have a responsibility to manage our own ignorance to minimize its negative impacts. If you don't know better, educate yourself. And if you do know better, do better. Thank you.